Welcome to It's a Woman's World, a show which discusses any and all topics under the sun from a woman's point of view. Hosted by Ali Naithani. Here's Ali.
Welcome to the show. We're going to get started on the show by talking about pay equity. But before we begin, I'd like to introduce who's at the table with me today. So first of all, we'll start with Nava Johnson. Welcome, Nava.
Thank you.
And Uma Janga.
Hi, Wally.
Hello. And we have Dr. Susan Strauss.
Howdy.
Hello.
Good to be here.
Good to see you. And we have Janita Cathy with us as well.
Hello.
And of course, we have Bonnie Watkins, who's our guest today. She's normally part of our crew behind the camera, but she's with us today. So welcome.
Thank you.
All right. Well, why don't you get us started, Nava? You've done some research into this issue of pay equity, and so tell us.
Sure.
What's going on?
So first off, did you know that Minnesota women earn only 80% of what their male counterparts earn? And the gap is even larger depending if you're a woman of color, if you're a woman in the rural areas, or if you're an elder woman. So the pay equity bill aims to reduce the ongoing earning gaps between men and women. And so Bonnie Watkins is a member of the Pay Equity Coalition. So could you speak about your tasks of a member of the Pay Equity Coalition?
Sure. This is actually something I've worked on for about 30 years. Tells you how long I've been around. But this year at the state capitol, the Pay Equity Coalition is supporting a bill, a piece of legislation that would reach out to the private sector for the first time to take a second look at how we pay women, specifically in those companies that get state contracts. So there's about $2 billion worth of taxpayer dollars goes to things that the private sector does through contract. And we already have a good law that affects every city, county, and school district, all the public sector, that really requires a look at the whether women are paid fairly, to make it short and sweet. And now we think it's time. That's been in place for 30 years and been very carefully monitored and maintained for 30 years. Now we think it's time to move that into the private sector, particularly when you get these huge contracts. The bill would apply to contracts of more than $500,000 and companies that have more than 40 employees. So we're not talking mom and pop grocery store here by and large. So this bill has been in the process, and it's a crazy process. We can talk about more if people like. Moving through the House and the Senate at the same time. We have wonderful chief authors, Senator Sandy Pappas in the Senate, Representative Rena Moran in the House. And I've had the great pleasure of testifying at 4 of the hearings it's been through for. I think we've passed through 7 committees so far between the House and Senate. And in every committee, there's questions, there's testimony, there's opposition, notably, from the big business groups who think this is too hard for them to do. And it's amended in almost every committee. And to make a long story short, it is amended down to what I consider pretty minimal requirements right now. Basically, the companies have to certify that they abide by the Equal Pay Act. There's actually 4 laws that require equal pay for equal work. And we are really talking female truck drivers and male truck drivers. You know what I mean? We're not talking anything more complicated than that at this point. But they need to certify that they use those laws in setting pay, that if they identify a problem with that they will fix the problem. And then they need to get a certificate from the Department of Human Rights that says that they comply with that. Human Rights has, and they have to have that certificate in order to bid on a state contract. Human Rights has the ability to audit and see if they really do live up to those things later. And that is our hope of the Pay Equity Coalition, is that in that auditing process, we can get some information about, because you know everything in the private sector is very secret. You can't really talk about salaries, right? You can't really get a list of who's paid what.
But why are we, why isn't this fixed by now?
That's
like,
right.
It's
That's
2014.
right.
So tell me, Tell me more about that. What do you think about that? Why are we,
Well, we need the more information to find out exactly where that is. As I say, we've had this really good law in public sector where, the data that we have, which isn't perfect, indicates that we have eliminated the earnings gap if you work for the government. In the private sector, we just don't really know where it is. Some people say it is. Equal pay for equal work is not being enforced. Some say it's that women are concentrated in jobs that are service and caregiving and clerical, which tend to pay less, not always for the right reasons. Some of those jobs are incredibly responsible, life and death jobs. One of the examples we often give is a registered nurse and a computer programmer. Most RNs are women. Most computer programmers are men. The state has a system that really measures objectively the level of responsibility for jobs, and those two are found very similar. They're typically jobs you get, your first year out of college with those kinds of degrees. On average in Minnesota, the computer programmer is paid $10,000 a year more than the RN. So those kind of patterns, which I think really, we just hear so many stories that it goes back to when a woman challenges this, the answer is, well, he's the breadwinner. Those sorts of things are still built into the way we pay people. So that's been the effort, is to get people to think differently. And we need to find out more about why the pay difference is still there.
And I think we do need that transparency, though. And federally, they're saying you cannot tell anybody. The National Labor Review Board has said you cannot keep any of this private. And one corporation is going to be publishing everybody's salaries. Everybody will be made aware of it. And I think that transparency in the corporation is going to help diminish, hopefully, some of that pay inequity, hopefully. So the federal law would be supportive of that.
And some of my colleagues in the Pay Equity Coalition are really advocating that as a good business practice.
Yes.
You really don't want to have those big secrets that blow up
No.
into a big class action lawsuit. But I don't know that many employers are ready.
So to
But
make
even
this,
if they ask you, do you think they will disclose the correct salary amount? I don't think so.
It'd be hard to disclose a fake amount.
Yeah, well,
I guess to make this simple, what we're saying is when you're looking at the types of fields that are generally dominated by male or female, that's where we're finding the inequities in pay. It's not that if a male and a female are applying for the same RN position that they will be paid differently. It's more because this particular career is dominated by women, they tend to have lower wages, and this particular career is dominated by men, they tend to have higher wages,
my
and that's
guess.
where it compounds, and that's why we're still talking about in 2014.
Probably.
Okay.
There's another piece, which is that, actually, there are census data that show that male RNs are paid more than female
Yes, there
RNs.
is.
But the bigger
Really?
problem,
Yes.
if again, you're looking at the structure of the labor force, is that they're just, like, people keep telling women to be engineers, right? We're all supportive of those STEM jobs. We should all go into science and technology and math. But the fact is, there aren't that many engineer jobs, you know what I mean? So even if we get 10 more women to be engineers this year, that's not going to solve the problem. We still need all those child care workers and home health aides
they're
and
not-
all those things that women do.
And they're not staying in engineering, they're leaving because of pay inequity and the sexism and discrimination that's going on in engineering. So there's an example. You've got engineers that are men and women, but the male engineers are making more than the women are. So I would argue that I don't think it's just in terms of what kind of job we are in or career, but it's also even training and development. Men make more money in training and development than do women, sometimes as much as $10,000. So I think
should
it
mention
happens
that it's a
within.
combination of lots of things,
Yeah.
probably.
Right.
There is this pay equity bill I'm referring to is part of a big package of, it was originally about 13 bills. I think it's down to about 8, called collectively the Women's Economic Security Omnibus Bill, which we hope it will become the Women's Economic Security Act. And it also includes things like making it possible for nursing mothers to get a break to express their milk, not in a toilet stall, those things. Actually, all they have in it now is if you already have paid sick leave, that you can use that when your kids are sick. It's all those things also that make women's lives a little bit easier in the workplace, because we still do shoulder that little bit more responsibility at home, so.
Okay, so bring in the race piece, because not only is it that 80% gap, now we're talking the gap increases when you start talking about race and then
Yeah.
Yep.
geographically where you live.
And
Tell me
age.
about that. Why are we still talking about this?
Well, I think it is, again, historically like we used to say education, the education gap, but now there's more women graduating from college all the time, and I think women of color are greatly increasing their numbers in those advanced fields. But I also think that the racial piece is often getting the job in the first place, which is, again, why we have to have, affirmative action, keep on going, in addition to look at how much pay you get when you're hired. So I'm guessing in many cases that's the additional barriers for women of color to get the job, and then what kind of job do you get? And do they keep you in that job and treat you good? All those things put together, I think, is the.
And then do we
the
have
pattern.
any data on, okay, so women of color may be paid less, but then when you bring in males of color, are they impacted? Is the gap still the same when you're basically comparing apples to apples?
Men of color earn more on average than women of color
Okay.
in each racial group. But men of color for sure earn less than white men too. So, I mean, all of these things are this layering of racism and sexism and, ableism,
Yeah.
so many other issues.
Classism.
Ageism.
But to hear that even, if they even get the job, I mean, what's
That's
with
right.
that too?
That's right.
That's really astounding, isn't it?
It's
That,
inexcusable.
we think in today's, this is 2014, come on, that if they even get the job. Well, what do we need to change? Is there more discussion on some of those kind of statements?
Well, I think I should have mentioned before, so we have this pay equity law for governments, but the other piece that we already have in place for contractors is affirmative action, actually. That's been in place for quite some time, that again, if I'm a big business and want to bid on a big state contract, whether it's to build a highway or, whatever, I need to have an approved affirmative action plan by the Human Rights Department. We've been talking to the Human Rights Department, and they are, underfunded, of course, always. But they are doing the best they can, but I'm starting to wonder if we need to look at those. We've been doing that for 10 years. That was a theory. If we didn't have any female-dominated or male-dominated jobs, or black-dominated jobs, or white-dominated jobs, you know what I mean? We wouldn't have pay problems. But apparently, we still have segregation in every aspect of the job market. So I'm going, either we need more affirmative action, or we need to enforce better what we already have. We really need to attack it in a multi-pronged way.
We do. What have been the political challenges with this in terms of both sides of the aisle?
Well, it's very interesting that certainly there's one party that generally is more supportive than the other. But even that, every politician is very worried about big business. Nobody wants the Chamber of Commerce to be opposing them in their reelection campaign. And this year, every member of this Minnesota House of Representatives is up for election in November. So, the Chamber of Commerce doesn't like these bills. And it's an issue. It's really an issue for everybody. There is no one party that's perfect on this, I assure
So
you.
we're not getting support as women really from either party particularly.
Well, we are. I mean, both parties really want to say they're doing good things for
Oh, of
women.
course
And that's
they
part of the
do.
challenge as advocates, as volunteer advocates especially. We're trying to get this message framed properly, because believe me, there's plenty of people who will pass a bill saying, we're not going to throw you in jail this year, and say, victory for women! And you just go, we're really not going to stand behind you at the podium at that
Right.
press conference. So trying to make something that truly is meaningful and not let them take credit for things that they really don't deserve credit for is interesting.
Bonnie, when you go and testify, maybe you could just say something. What do you say when you testify?
Well, I do actually tailor it. First of all, I keep it really short. I tailor it to the committee. Like, some committees only care about the fiscal impact, and some committees only care about the data privacy. So, having that amount of information is really, really helpful. I am actually kind of the technical expert. I wrote an administrative rule on pay equity back in the 1990s, and so I can explain the fancy math that's involved in this. Not that
Okay.
anybody wants to hear that, but I can assure them that there is fancy math. There's another kind of testimony that we have used that's really important too, which is to get what they call real people to come and tell their stories about what happened in their workplace. That's a challenge because, again, women are not encouraged to go talk publicly about how badly they're treated on their jobs, but we try to balance all those factors.
Okay.
What is your advice for women in the future to?
Oh, yeah.
Quick spiel. My theory, I have tried to organize women around many different issues, and this is probably the hardest. And my theory is women think their low pay is their own fault. I just think so many of us go, well, I shouldn't have worked part-time. I should have been an engineer. I should have negotiated harder. The boss didn't like me. My mother dresses me funny. You know what I mean? We think it's our fault. And we think about individual solutions, that I need to claw my way up the corporate ladder. I really think we need to band together in any ways we can to fight for better pay.
All right, well said. I hope we can get back around this table and talk
Yes.
about that it's all level now. That's going to be our goal, okay? That's
Next
our
year.
conversation.
Not in our lifetime.
But thank you, Bonnie, for sharing your insights
you.
and for the research that you did.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.